Segue un intervento di Lori Waxman, che è giornalista e professoressa a Chicago, e anche curatrice del programma di performance che avranno luogo nei collegamenti tra una sede e l'altra del Congresso. Quindi a seguito di questo intervento la prima performance ci accompagnerà verso la sala Beppe Fenoglio. Grazie.
Hello. Hello, comrades. We are running late, so I will keep my report much briefer than planned. I address you today with a passion and purpose that I believe to be necessary if we are to achieve the better world, or perhaps an updated version of it, called for by the participants of the original Alba platform of 1956. Many novel artistic methods were proposed and attempted around the time of the original Congress, but there is a uniquely accessible and impactful tactic that deserves special note, and which will be the focus of my address to you today: walking. Yes, walking. Most likely, not the exact type of walking you did to get to this lecture hall today, and also perhaps not the type of walking you envision when the words walking and revolution are put together, but walking nevertheless. We will walk on 2 feet, on all fours, in a wheelchair, with the help of prosthetic limbs. We will walk our way to that better world. Walking is an action to which most people, save podiatrists, have given little thought. It is also an unskilled movement that is self-taught by children as young as 9 months. And yet, the members of the Lettrist International and the Imaginist Bauhaus valued it deeply for its revolutionary potential. From their earliest days onward, they practiced their own idiosyncratic version of walking, which the Lettrists and later the Situationists referred to as the dérive. More on the dérive later. To understand walking as a renegade action is not without precedent. So a bit of backstory first. This lecture goes backwards and forwards. For most of its 3.7 million year-long history, walking has simply been how any but the most privileged humans got around. Walking was how you hunted animals, gathered food, escaped threats, set off to war, migrated somewhere safer, farmed fields, went to work in factories, courted a potential spouse, visited with relatives, and returned back home again. But evidence of walking's vanguard possibilities began to reveal itself at least as early as the Romantic era in England. That was when the poet William Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy took off on foot to live and ramble in the Lake District, where their unusual desire to immerse themselves daily in the wilderness revealed a new appreciation for nature, which until then had mostly been kept at bay, even in paintings. At the time, anyone with the means to choose their conveyance would have picked a horse and carriage. Those who walked for leisure did so in gardens where order reigned. Wordsworth, by contrast, is said to have composed his poems whilst he walked on the trails. The Wordsworths and their romantic contemporaries revealed, through their walking in the wild and on the public roads, a willingness to be completely unconventional, to identify with the poor, who walked everywhere, often without shoes, and to make a new kind of art, one that brought the self, the world, and artistic production together as one. Fast forward a century or so to Paris, and we find the young surrealists trying to walk their way to a revolution of their own design. When Breton and Aragon and their friends wandered the streets and arcades, parks and flea markets of their city, they were seeking chance encounters. They were trying to find the unfamiliar within the familiar. They wanted to destroy boredom. They wanted to access the marvelous elements of life. This might have appeared in the form of a prostitute, like Nadja, with her access to the uncanny elements of the city, or it might have been a display in a dusty old pharmacy window, come hallucinogenically to life. The city was the surrealist ready-made, a banal place reimagined as a site of dreams, of the unconscious, of art. They had many means for bringing together the seemingly unrelated, of which you can see examples on the screens, but a constant among them was the act of walking. Just as the exquisite corpse drawing game sketched together 3 or 4 irreconcilable body parts, walking was able to tie together their found urban experiences into a gargantuan automatic artwork. But the city, at least Paris in the late 1920s and 30s, was also a place undergoing great modernization. It was an era in which a newspaper could bemoan le dernier flâneur due to the increased presence of automobiles on the road. Imagine, the last flaneur. And so when the Surrealists roamed Paris at all hours, when they wandered the city's outskirts and its less fashionable districts, they were going resolutely against many flows. Against the flow of modern urban design, which was tearing down arcades to widen car lanes, regulating unidirectional traffic, and installing electric signal lights. Against the flow of the incessant capitalist economic cycle, which rendered certain establishments and neighborhoods and artifacts passé. Against the duty to be moral, to be gainfully employed, to be commonsensical, which put one into bed at night, ready for work the next morning. And one of the Surrealists' primary tactics for doing so was walking. Now this brings us to the era of the Alba Congress, or perhaps a few years before. With the soon-to-be founded Situationist International, as with so much else, new ideas often must percolate before they can fully emerge. So what were these artists doing before they got to Alba? The young members of the Lettrist International, among them Gilles Wolman and Guy Debord, appeared to have spent a whole lot of time getting high on cheap liquor, hashish, and ether, and wandering the streets of Saint-Germain-des-Prés, as well as various immigrant and working-class districts on the city's left bank. Various memoirs indicate that these types of long, disorienting, playful walks, which they would come to call the dérive, were common among the group's members at least as early as 1952. These wanderings could be the stumblings from one drinking hole to another and then on a bit further. They could be a ramble through the then off-limits catacombs under the city. They could be an adventure cloaked in paranoia, complete with a chase scene involving Hasidic men and various inexplicable coincidences. They could also be quite extreme in duration. The young lettrist Gilles Yvain, who went by the pen name Ivan Checheglov, called for a continuous dérive, though he later repudiated that notion, explaining that a dérive of 3 to 4 months straight in 1953 to 54 very nearly killed them. The lettrist dérives can sound a lot like the debauched roamings of a bunch of bohemian hoodlums, and perhaps they were, but they were also a way of rejecting the norms of bourgeois society. Debord later explained, "It is obviously out of the question that we should pave the way for the revolution of everyday life with asceticism. And revolution of everyday life is exactly what they wanted. Could they get there by drifting? Maybe part way, but crucial to this was how the dérive offered the chance to observe the psychogeographic effects of the city. Psychogeography studies the way a city feels to its inhabitants and how these feelings are affected by architecture, urban planning, policing, and other urban endeavors. The lettrists and later the Situationists published many notations of their psychogeographic findings. Among them are examples you can see on the screens here, as well as many types of written accounts in their various journals. One of these was an account by Gilles Wolman in which he renamed streets in the 7e arrondissement based on how they felt to him while he was drifting. So the Rue de Ménilmontant became the rue where no one seems to notice or get in the way, extension. They often issued updates on places previously suggested as being ripe for dérives, since cities are always changing, and thus their effects are too. Michel Bernstein, for example, notes in a missive that the Rue Sauvage has been blocked off by massive PTT offices, that the red light district has moved, and that the Square des Missions Étrangères has been occupied by prefab caravans. This is standard urban theory today. At the time, it was practically unheard of. But in these urban shifts, known or activated through a radical walking practice, the lettrists understood the potential for a new world to be walked into existence. The most extreme artistic response to the ideas was architectural. Soon after attending the 56th Congress, the painter Constant declared himself an ex-artist and instead devoted him, for the better part of the next 2 decades, to designing the city of the future. This would be another city for another life. modeled on the principles of unitary urbanism and the dérive. Indeed, Constant originally named it Dériveville, and he was inspired by, as we learned from Tom, the nomadic gypsy community in Alba, camped on Galizio's land. Dériveville would be later dubbed New Babylon by Debord, and it was conceived as a labyrinthine city with no fixed abodes, where the inhabitants could participate in an endless recalibration of the decor, where ladders and sliding panels would be as common, if not more so, than walls and roads. Vehicular traffic was safely relegated to a lower level, and the overall preoccupation of the citizens was to drift from one constructed situation to another. It was an impossibility, of course, but visionary architecture is called visionary for a reason. We can think, too, of Galizio's own industrial painting system, of which there is a wonderful example in the exhibition. The great potential of these heavily worked scrolls was the environments that could be created by hanging and draping them across walls, ceilings, floors, and bodies. Any truly environmental artwork expects that you will move through it or with it in order for an experience to occur. Yes, you can stand and you can sit, but you cannot only do that. You must move around in order to activate the artwork. It assumes walking. This brings us to the concept of unitary urbanism, one of the most essential ideas that arose from the Alba Congress. What is it? It is first and foremost a critique of status quo urbanism. It argues that urban design cannot be wholly functional. It must be enthrallingly functional, spurring exploration and stimulation while also attending to more pragmatic needs. How to achieve this goal involves a new understanding of artistic practices in which art is not detached from its surroundings and not restricted by its traditional limits. All of the examples we've seen so far attempt to do this, whether it's the dérive or it's industrial painting. With the dérive, of course, it's based on the real city that pre-exists, and the way one walks through the city, if it is playful and constructive enough, can remake the city. Now, as part of the 2019 Congress here, we have scheduled 9 ambulatory performances to be reenacted in between the various lectures and reports. They have been chosen for the ways in which they activate some of these ideas from the original Congress, for how they use the easily overlooked act of walking to infiltrate the pre-existing city and its functionalist ways and means, with impressions, however fleeting, of a more imaginative, critical, integrated existence. Some of these reenactments are made possible through the notion of the score, the fluxus idea taken from musical composition, that sets down in writing a set of instructions according to which a performance can be undertaken and interpreted by anyone. Other performances have necessitated a bit more liberty on our part as organizers, and we have attempted ourselves to score a performance after the fact so that we can reenact it. There's a group of 5 local performers who will be reenacting, and you might see them and you might not. So I'm now going to skip where I actually describe all the performances because we don't have time and you will look for them. But I wish to say one general point about them, which is that one of the reasons why we have printed out these scores for you, and you can all find them in the pamphlet, they're in English and Italian, is that we believe anyone ought to attempt them. Why? To make walking strange, to make the city more enthralling, to live a different life, even if just for a moment. The participants in the original Alba Congress did not set its goals to make a better future just for themselves. It was supposed to be for everyone. And nearly everyone can walk, even if they need a wheelchair to do it in. So please do it.